This podcast is nearing its 3rd anniversary, and it's about time I introduce my biggest fan. His name is Kelley Durrant, and he's 14 years old.
We've been listening to your podcast.
Oh my goodness, what do you think about it?
Good.
Yeah?
I love the How She's Mom's podcast.
Cameron has listened to every episode and won't let his mom listen without him. I asked him how his mom helps him.
She helps our family. She does our laundry for us. And then she cooks for us too. Then she also sets the table for us too.
Of course, his mom, Kelley Durrant, does much, much more for Cameron than laundry and table setting. This is the How She Moms podcast with Whitney Archibald. I'm a mother of 5 on a mission to help moms connect with your kids, manage your homes, and create your own unique version of motherhood. I curate ideas from different moms so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. Before I tell Kelley and Cameron's story today, I want to tell you about this episode's sponsor, Better Screen Time, and remind you that for the rest of January, you can get 20% off their online course, which my family and I are taking right now, called Creating a Tech Healthy Family. It was created by the fabulous Andrea Davis, who I featured in episode 68. It's such a great way to evaluate your family's relationship with technology and to set deliberate values and boundaries. Honestly, my kids have been a little wary about all this because they think I want to take away all their screens forever, so I've had to introduce the principles I'm learning very gradually. But I love Andrea's approach of having the kids take the lead on setting some of the boundaries. So we've been doing a lot of screen time experiments around our house, trying on different boundaries and seeing how they go. I'll talk more about these experiments in next week's episode, but for now, I'd love it if you'd join me in taking this course. You can buy it at betterscreentime.com. Just use the code HowSheMoms for your 20% off discount. I believe every mom has an important story to tell. We all have our own hero's journey tailor-made for us, and usually that journey is nothing like what we expect. Today we get the privilege of hearing my dear friend Kelley Durrant tell about the unexpected paths she has traveled as a mother. Paths that have included a lot of challenges, infertility, the loss of a daughter, a son with special needs, but also a lot of learning, giving, and adventure, including a surprise, record-breaking physical talent, a year living abroad, and a cow named Tina. How do I begin to describe Kelley Durrant? She's strong, and so are her opinions and her will. This woman does not back down. This makes her a great advocate for her son Cameron. She's also extremely kind, always looking for a way to help others, even in some of her own hardest times, as you will also see. And she's extremely honest. It's really refreshing to have a friend like Kelley because you know she's always going to tell you exactly what she thinks. I'll let her show you what I mean by jumping right into our interview. Did you always know you wanted to be a mom?
I never wanted to be a mom. I was happy not being a mom. We went through 10 years of infertility, unexplained infertility, and I was okay with who I was and who we were and my place in the world and my place in the church and my place with my friends. And I was okay if that never happened. But in the back of my head, I always knew that Heavenly Father had a different plan, and I assumed that children would come, and then they did.
Of course, it wasn't that simple. Kelley and her husband Leo went through some preliminary fertility treatments like IUI and Clomid, but since, as you just heard, she was already hesitant about motherhood, she didn't want to go any further than that. Then, to their surprise, they found out Kelley was pregnant. With twins. I asked her what she thought about that.
I was actually really excited for twins. I thought that was going to be a really fun way to come into this motherhood journey. And I looked forward to that, and I thought it was really fun.
It was a rough pregnancy. Irregular bleeding started just 6 weeks in and then continued. She went into a specialist once a week from that point on. At 23 weeks, she started going into premature labor.
And so I went to the maternal fetal specialist again, and he said, "You're dilated and you're effacing already, and you're only 23 weeks along, and so we need to do bed rest. You need to stop working in the office, and you need to go." And he told me to go register at the hospital. And when I was at the hospital, I told them that I thought I was having contractions. And so they put me on a monitor, and sure enough, I was every 15 minutes.
What's going through your head at this point?
Well, I don't know, because it's my first, and I don't know the severity of it. And I'm just the kind of person that tries to stay kind of even keeled about things. I try not to get overly excited or overly the opposite, like the pendulum swing. So it's just like, okay, this is what we have to do. So we did it. But when I walked into the hospital that day, they were like, they put me on the bed and they said, your feet aren't touching the floor again until these babies come.
I can't even imagine you on bed rest.
I may or may not have been a great patient.
This lasted about 2 weeks. Then
the babies came. I mean, the process had already started and the medicine can only stave it off for so long. Yeah. So they came right at 25 weeks, like they just completed 25 weeks, 0 days. They told us at the time that in those 20s, those early 20s, that you can flip the numbers and that's the survival rate. So at 25 weeks, we had a 52% chance of survival, which ultimately ended up being our story because only one of the two twins survived ultimately.
She gave birth to Ressa and Cameron, who were whisked off to the NICU immediately. Ressa initially did much better than Cameron.
She was progressing medically faster than Cameron was, which they say is typical. The boys have a harder time and the girls generally do a little bit better. So she actually came off of her intubated oxygen after just a day and had just a nasal cannula. So we were able to see her face a little bit better. And she was able to use her mouth a little bit. I was pumping my breast milk from the get-go. They weren't able to nurse. They were so tiny. So for those 3.5 weeks, we spent time. They do what they call kangaroo care, where it's skin-to-skin contact. So I had a special wrap-style shirt that would allow me to open up, and she could lay on my chest. And Leo had time with her as well. And we spent a lot of time at the hospital to be with them. And
At what point did you know that she wasn't going to make it?
It wasn't until just a day or so before she passed. So Friday night, after about 3 weeks in, we were at the hospital and her coloring looked a little off to me. But I didn't really think much of it. Her vitals seemed to be okay. But then we went back on Saturday and she did not look well. And they had tested her and she tested positive for an intestinal infection that's called necrotizing enterocolitis. And necrotizing means dying or killing off. And so what it does is it kills off your intestine. And it's very common for preemies, but not all preemies get a very severe case and not all preemies die from that illness. But she was diagnosed with that on Saturday. It happened so fast. And we really debated whether to even go home that night or whether to stay in the hospital. But there really was nothing that we could do. And ultimately, we felt an answer that everything would be okay. And so we went back home about 30 minutes away and tried to get a good night's sleep that Saturday night. And we were woken up about 7 o'clock in the morning on Sunday telling us that she had not gotten any better. She'd actually gotten worse and that she would pass away that day and that we could come up there and offer her comfort care. That's all that the hospital could do at that point was to keep her comfortable, but that she ultimately would pass away that day, that she would not make it. So at first, you kind of question the thoughts that you get. Like, we really truly felt on Saturday night that everything would be okay. Like, that was an answer that we received as we thought about and prayed about, do we leave tonight or do we stay or what do we do? And so you start to question that. And then realize that our version of okay is different than deity's version of okay. But it's a very strange position to know that someone that you love and you're going to be with them is going to pass through the veil that day. Like, that's a very interesting situation to be in. But again, you do what you have to do. And so we put our clothes on and we got up there and we called some people from our church to let them know what was happening. And we did choose that we wanted to give her a name and a blessing before she passed away. And so we had some clergy that joined us up at the hospital and we were able to do that. And then we spent the day just holding her and spending time in the hospital. Ultimately, giving them permission to pull certain medicines off or certain machines that didn't need to function anymore so that she could go through that process of passing.
Meanwhile, Cameron had been struggling from the beginning. He weighed just 1 pound 7 ounces at birth. Then he got spinal meningitis, which resulted in hydrocephalus and a surgery to relieve the pressure with a shunt. He also had another surgery to repair a hole in his bowel, all before Ressa died. He also wasn't able to breathe on his own for the first 10 weeks of his life. I asked Kelley how they processed their grief while still being so consumed with Cameron's needs.
I don't know that I'm very good at going through processes. I think my personal MO is I just plug along. I just do what I have to do. But the crazy thing about grief is that sometimes it comes out of nowhere. And so I remember one very, very specific incident where I had trouble with the bank and I had been charged a charge that shouldn't have been there. And so I had to call the bank. And I remember I can picture myself standing in my bedroom, and Ressa had recently passed. And I remember just freaking out and going off on this bank representative on the other end of the phone, and yelling that my daughter had just died and why do I have to deal with this, and just make the charge go away. And I remember, like, it comes out of nowhere. It's so irrational, right? And I guess you get through those moments and they help you release a little bit. And that poor bank representative. But yeah, I guess I just keep plugging along. I mean, Cameron was there, and that was a blessing to have another focus. I think that made a really big difference to have him still there, because we had somewhere to direct our efforts, and we had a purpose, and we had a reason to keep going. Yeah. You know, we had to be at the hospital, we had to do this. And then after a couple of weeks, I was back at work. I worked full time, and I had to go back to work. And then we had to figure out, how do we both work full time and then get to the hospital to spend time with our baby in the NICU. And so it just was what it was for that period of time.
That's like mind-boggling.
Yeah.
That you had to go back to work during all this.
And I received incorrect information. And so I had to go back after 6 weeks when I should have had 8 weeks, because the difference between the type of births, and I received wrong information from my HR department. And so at 6 weeks, I went back, and I had dealt with Ressa dying, traveling out of state. I got mastitis during that time, had to come back and get that taken care of, and pumping my milk and going back to work full time. And yeah, it's a lot.
I think it's clear we need a whole episode in the future about maternity leave and maternity policies. But for now, let's get back to Kelley's story. Cameron stayed in the NICU for 4 months in a hospital 30 minutes from home.
From early on, I mean, we knew that there would be challenges. And then the doctors have a responsibility, and they pull us into a family meeting probably about halfway through our time there, so 2.5 months in. And they say, we need to let you know that we don't know how he will be. We can't predict, we can't diagnose, we can't tell you what he will or will not do. But what we need to tell you is that he may not ever walk, he may not ever talk, he may not ever feed himself, he may not ever breathe on his own. You know, we just don't know the severity of things. And that was a very sobering meeting to have. But I'm not the kind of person that necessarily goes to worst case scenario. I don't always, not always, think about long-term repercussions of things. And so it's almost a little more day to day or week to week. So, you know, we just had to get him breathing on his own. And so we got to that point and we get through that. And then we had to get him to take feeds. And so the hospital worked with him and the nurses worked with him. But yeah, early on we knew that there would be challenges. But I think until you live it, you don't know what that's going to be. And some people do have that worst case scenario where their children never walk and never talk and never accomplish any of those motor skill types of things. And Cameron's different. I mean, he is walking and he is talking and he feeds himself very well, and he's overcome a lot And when you look at him and to go from that meeting that we had and to see where he is now, he truly is a miracle.
Ultimately, Cameron's overarching diagnosis is cerebral palsy, and he also has a seizure disorder and intellectual and developmental delays. After so many hard months, one of the great blessings that the Durrant family received is that a woman from their church congregation offered to be Cameron's nanny while Kelley and her husband worked full-time. This wonderful woman became like a bonus grandmother to him, and they still think of her as part of their family. Another great blessing was that Kelley discovered a hidden superpower that she could use to bless the lives of countless other babies. Her body was just naturally very prodigious at producing milk. She pumped and stored a lot of milk from the very beginning, and then when Ressa died, she realized she had more than enough for Cameron. So she discovered that she could donate her milk, and she found a local milk bank.
So I nursed Cameron till he was about 2, maybe a little bit less for him. But during that time, I was pumping and donating the whole time, and it ended up that I donated enough ounces that it was over 100 gallons of milk, which is crazy, right?
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine 100 gallons of milk at the store? Yeah. So, but these babies, it's like the numbers would truly be staggering if we figured it out, because sometimes these micro preemies only eat an ounce or 2 a day. And when I donated nearly 13,000 ounces, that's a lot of babies that got to get a lot of milk. And that's amazing to think about.
I asked Kelley about her transition to motherhood, especially under such dramatic circumstances.
I feel like from an emotional standpoint, I think subconsciously there was some detachment there because we didn't know if he was going to make it at first. And especially after Ressa passed away, then you kind of, and again, it was totally subconscious. It was not a conscious thing, but I think we kind of, Leo and myself, I think we both resisted getting too close at first. But I've felt this over the years. Cameron's 14 now. But just anyone in life, when you spend time with them, especially in a caregiver role, you come to love those people, and you have deeper feelings for them when you get an opportunity to serve them and to help take care of them. And I think that that's kind of how that relationship and those feelings kind of developed for me, because I had this little boy that needed my help and needed my care. And I think through the course of offering him what he needed and providing for him, I think that love came, and that maternal instinct, that protection and that desire for him to be the best and things. I think it developed maybe a little bit slower than other people, especially because I didn't start out with that overwhelming maternal instinct. It wasn't like I was craving that in the first place. So when it happened, it was a little bit of a different growth process for me, I think.
Yeah. Did you feel like there was a bit of a grieving process for him too, like for who you thought he was going to be, and then?
Yes, and I think that still happens. And I think it happened at different points and stages when we would find out another thing that he had a challenge with, or we would see other kids his age doing certain accomplishments or making certain strides that he wasn't. There's constant grieving in all of that. Every time he wasn't meeting his developmental milestones, but other people, there were 12 or 14 of us that all had babies within a 6-month period in our church congregation. And so to see all those other babies growing and developing and meeting those milestones, and then he wasn't, there's always a little bit of sadness with that every time. Even when he's 6 months old and not rolling over, and even when he's 2 years old and not walking, and even all these different things. So yeah, grieving with him and for him, and that still happens. He has a different life. And years ago, when I was in college, long before I was married and we had this experience, I remember seeing some disabled people, and I remember feeling sorry for them or feeling sad for them. And I don't remember if it was a conversation I had with someone or just a thought that I had, but thinking to myself, these people are probably happy in their life because they don't know any different. They're probably happy in their life, and I'm projecting my life expectations on them, assuming that they're sad or disappointed or whatever. And I've really come to see that with Cameron, that he loves his life. he's happy with his life. And so the things that I grieve for him are my expectations or my experiences that he's not going to have. And that's not always fair or right, because they're not grieving opportunities for him. He's not sad about those experiences. He doesn't know that he's not going to have them. Yeah, because it's not our life, it's theirs to live. And if they're sad about something, hopefully we give them means to talk about it or to work through that. But many times we're sad for things that they're never sad for. Yeah. They don't know that they're missing out.
I then asked her if she has any overarching strategies that have emerged as she's learned to parent Cameron.
I think my strategy is to let him lead more than I'm probably willing to do. I may or may not have a little bit of a control aspect to my personality. And him giving us opportunities to step outside of that hasn't always been comfortable or easy for me. But the more that I do it, the more I see him blossom and the more I see other people affected and blessed by him. He is very social. He wants to talk to everyone. He wants to be involved in everything. And it's created situations sometimes where I would rather just stay to myself and go from point A to point B and keep my head down and not talk to anybody and just do what I have to do. But yet Cameron will wander off. He'll start a conversation with someone. He'll get in a situation that we have to rectify because maybe something happened or he's lost and we have to call the police or certain things. And I guess my strategy is to realize that he's his own person. And even with his challenges and his disabilities, he's got a lot of abilities. And that's been a big shift and a big thing that I consciously have to think about and consciously have to cultivate in him. Not in him, but give him opportunity to cultivate those things and opportunity to grow into himself. And it's a big challenge for me because he is our first. We don't have any other practical experience with how to navigate teenagerhood. And so navigating teenagerhood along with his challenges, I don't know what's what. I don't know what's normal teenage angst and problems versus he has a little bit of extra challenge with this because of some of his brain development or intellectual delays and things like that. And so that's been a big challenge and again, a learning experience for me to figure out how to step back, let him become his own person and give him opportunities to succeed and fail.
As Cameron has grown, there have been many times that Kelley has had to advocate for Cameron specifically and for other kids with special needs.
Again, another aspect of my personality. I'm not necessarily a quiet person. I generally speak my mind, but I don't necessarily go out looking for a fight. And there have been times when I've had to be the mama bear and I've had to stand up for Cameron. And I hope that the result... I'm surprised it took this long to get to this point. I hope that the result of some of that is that we've made the world a better place for other people, other kids who've had challenges, who maybe their parents don't have it in them to fight that fight. And that hopefully by us blazing the way a little bit, like maybe it's getting other people to think and realize so that when the next kid comes along that's got some challenges, it's a little bit easier road for them. And I've thought throughout the years of my life, as I know we all do, what's my purpose or what's my mission or what am I supposed to be doing? And I had this epiphany a couple years ago that it's, for me, I know it's different for everyone. For me, it's not one big grandiose thing. For me, it's being where I need to be and where the Lord has placed me. And that when I'm where I need to be, that things will come that I need to do. And I just need to do them and trust and know that the Lord has put me there so that I can do that thing. So dealing with Cameron's stuff or being a voice and just taking advantage of opportunities to learn more about the disabled community and the things that are good out there and the things that aren't good out there and helping to fix the things that aren't good and just being willing to be in the arena, which not everybody's willing to do. Not everybody has that in them. And I get that. There have been times in my life when I don't have the energy to do that. But I guess some of the blessings and experiences or opportunities that I wouldn't have taken on myself and seeing success and knowing that I have it in me and that I can be a voice.
I asked Kelley what his school experience has been like.
It's been interesting to see it change age to age. So elementary school, I felt was very difficult. I think that's a challenging age for all kids to be in school and learning and navigating social environment and experiences. I think at that really young age, kids were maybe scared of him. They didn't know how to approach him. They kind of just shied away. For our family, being very involved in our church community and even in our town community has been a really big blessing because we get to be there with Cameron a lot. And so we get an opportunity to bridge those interactions a little bit. And I think kids feel a little more safe when there's someone there to kind of buffer that situation. So I felt like elementary was hard. And I spent a lot of his elementary years trying to figure out how to cultivate friendships for him and how to give him those opportunities. I don't know that I was very successful at it. He never got invited to the birthday parties and things like that. But kids are kind. I don't think that there were mean things that happened. I just feel like that age of kids, it's difficult to cultivate good friendships. When he got to middle school, the teacher there is so amazing. And she has created some programs that give opportunity for the typical kids to interact with the special needs kids. They do a peer buddy program where the kids can sign up. It's a semester-long class. And for that period, they go into the special needs room and they interact with the special needs kids, or maybe they're the person that walks that special needs kid down to his classroom if he's in a general education class that period or whatever. And I think that's a great way to help those middle school kids learn that special needs kids are a lot like them, right? They have a lot of the same desires and wishes, and they're really fun if you get to know them and if you get past that kind of scary barrier. So his middle school was great, and so far this first semester of high school has truly been amazing. And I do give a lot of credit to our church community because there's a lot of kids that are in the grades older than him that already feel a little more comfortable in themselves, and they spend time making sure they say hi to him in the hall, or they include him in things and they let him know about their volleyball game that's going on or the things going on. And the community has been really good. The extracurriculars, they've been willing to incorporate him and make space for him to participate in theater and choir and things like that. And so I think so far high school has been better, the best, I think, of the three grades. So, and probably age and maturity is a big part of that with him and the other kids.
By now, you can probably see some of the attributes that I love most about Kelley. She cares deeply about other people. She has strong beliefs and acts upon those beliefs. She doesn't worry about what other people think of her or her decisions. And when she wants something, especially something she thinks will be good for her family, she goes out and gets it. That is what happened when she and Leo recently made their dream of moving their family, which now includes not just Cameron, but also her son Parker and daughter Cecily, out to the country.
I don't really know where that came from because when Leo and I were dating, he grew up on a farm in Idaho. He is a farm boy. And he had the opportunity. He finished an associate's degree in Salt Lake City and was planning to move back to run his family's farm in the Boise area. And I told him under no uncertain terms that I was not a farm girl and that I was a city girl, and that if we were going to make this work, I was not moving out to the farm with him. So fast forward 20 years later, and we packed things up and moved out. It's funny, sometimes if we just have desires and we talk about them and we think about them, I think naturally our paths take us there. Like our decisions and our thoughts and our actions, even subconsciously, kind of guide us in that direction. And so Leo and I had talked about for years, we'd like to live out on the country. We'd like to live out in the country. And then a couple years later, something came on the market and it just worked for us. So
I asked Cameron what he thinks about living out in the country.
Have a milk cow too.
Whoa, do you help with that?
Yeah. And then
Is she a nice cow?
yeah. And then sometimes she gets over the bucket.
Oh no, then what happens?
We just give it to our cat.
Oh, so she likes it when Tina kicks the bucket over, huh?
Yeah. Her to get the milk.
Sneaky.
Yeah.
By the way, this cow is named Tina after the llama in the movie Napoleon Dynamite. Cameron clearly loves their new home, and so do Parker and Cecily.
Just yesterday on the way to school, we had just milked the cow and we had finished piano practice in the morning and we were driving to school. And as we're driving out of the driveway, Parker says, "Man, I love living out here." Just a random comment. And Cecily in the back says, "I do too." And I thought, it's all worth it. We had a garden this year, and so spending time weeding the garden and harvesting the garden and watering the garden, those things just take up time where we get to be there together at home and do our own thing out there. Yeah. And now, of course, having the milk cow and having to milk her, and there are things that we are doing on our property that we're doing together, and they bring us closer together. So I would say ultimately, yes, draws us closer together and kind of gives us our little community out there.
Then one day, some friends came to visit them and mentioned that they were thinking about living abroad for a year. They talked about it a bit and decided that Costa Rica would be a safe, beautiful place to practice their Spanish and introduce the kids to a new culture.
And it was just a thought that wouldn't leave. And by February, I told Leo, I said, if we're going to do this, I said, we should just start saying it out loud. Because if we tell people we're going to do it and we don't, then we're going to look like fools. So if we just tell everybody, then we'll be working towards that. And so that was kind of my philosophy. Let's just start telling people that we're going to go move to Costa Rica for a year. And we looked into the country a little bit with some of Cameron's challenges. We wanted to make sure that we had medical resources available should he need them. And we found that they did. They had some of the specialists that he would need. And knowing that those resources were there kind of directed us in pursuing Costa Rica. So by February, that was kind of where our minds were set. And we just started like, okay, well, can Leo do work there? Can he talk to his boss about this? How would his boss feel about this? And what would we do about school? And so, yeah, we just started kind of putting feelers out there and telling my parents that we might not be around for a year and working through all of that. So we spent 2019 kind of heading down that path and seeing if it would work.
And what were your goals? What were you hoping to learn or accomplish with this?
So we just keep telling everyone we had a family adventure. Like, people are like, why did you go down there? Well, to have a family adventure. But as I thought about it a little bit more, I had a feeling that, and the feeling has subsided a little bit now that we're back and we've already done it, but especially before we went, I had this feeling that we just needed to draw our family closer together, which sounds funny because we just talked about how we've already kind of done that, being out on our little farm or whatever, our little property. But I just felt like the ages were good. So Parker at the time would have been, it just turned 10, and Cameron would have been 12-ish and Cecily 6. And those were just really good ages where they could remember the experience, and good ages before the world had gotten to them, if that makes sense. They were still at a good point where family was still the thing, and they weren't these rebellious preteens or teenagers yet. But knowing that that was coming, one of my main thoughts was that we just need to go and have time to bond. And we have a great family. I don't feel like we were dysfunctional or had problems with that necessarily before, but I just felt like we needed this for our family.
So, of course, they went. This is Kelley we're talking about. They didn't exactly expect COVID to happen while they were there, but they rolled with it, which, as you know by now, is just what they do. I asked Kelley what they learned from the experience.
So one thing was that the house we lived in was 525 square feet. And so we spent 14 months living in a tiny home that really is the size of our family room at our house out on our property. And so we had to learn how to be around each other, like truly physically, logistically. What does that mean to be in each other's space? And what does that mean to be so involved in everybody's life? So we spent a lot of time together, and we we looked for ways to have fun together. And we had the freedom to do that. They didn't have to be sitting in front of a computer or in a school desk for 6-8 hours a day. And so we had a lot of freedom to spend time with people in the neighborhood and get to know people. And Leo had worked some things out where his work was very flexible. And so if the beaches shut down for a while, and when they opened, they were only open from 5:30 to 8:30 in the morning. So we would get up and go to the beach from 5:30 to 8:30 in the morning. So Leo would come home and he would go to work at 10. And, you know, we had that family time together in the morning, and then the kids would do a little bit of schoolwork, and people would walk by our house. Being Americans in Costa Rica was a little bit of a novelty. And so people would come by pretty regularly, and we just had the flexibility to pay attention to those people and to see what was going on around us. And of course, we took advantage of the tourist things too, and did all the fun adventure things and got to know the country. I hope they just come back with knowing the world's bigger than them and bigger than our family even, and that they can do a lot of good with that.
I also asked Cameron what they did in Costa Rica.
We drove around a whole bunch. We did hikes. We saw monkeys.
What?
The first day when we just went down there for a vacation, this monkey got into my mom's red bag.
Oh no! Did he steal anything?
Yeah, he pulled out all of our bananas. We went on trips. We went on hikes as a whole family.
Oh, what about the beach?
Yes, we did water stuff.
Clearly, this was a memorable experience for their family, but I'm sure it wasn't always easy.
And sometimes we just plug through and we do what we have to do. And I think Leo and I lost sight a little bit of what we could do. Because we did go through 10 years where it was just the two of us, and we had opportunities to travel, which I love to do. And we had talked, maybe even before we got married, about wanting to live outside the country. Like that had been something we had talked about 20 years ago, and something we'd always wanted to do, and use our language skills that we had. And I feel like we lost sight of that. And a lot of that was probably because of Cameron. Again, subconsciously, but not really, but just kind of getting through day to day and getting through week to week and doing what we needed to do, and not looking up and not looking forward. And so we do have to adapt things. I mean, we still go out and do hikes, but instead of doing the whole 4 or 5 mile loop, we do a mile or two, and we go a lot slower, and we don't see all the same things that people see. Or when we go to, we did Disney World as a trip a few years ago. You know, we're not the ones running from ride to ride and doing 85 rides in a day. We may only get 8 or 10 rides in, but we make the most of those 8 or 10 rides, you know. It's a little bit of a balance with the other kids. Yeah. And sometimes there's always mom guilt about something, right? Sometimes there's mom guilt about that maybe they're not getting the maximum experience that they could have. But I think it's going to be a learning opportunity for them as they grow and they get more independent and they realize more that they can have different experiences, but also realizing how special those times were when we did ease off a little bit and accommodate for Cameron. I think that's going to be good for them. I see that I feel like they're good about looking outside themselves, which is not always a quality that kids have, right, especially at younger ages. And so I get very mama proud when I see them reach outside themselves, because they're aware of challenges that other people might have or other feelings that people have. But yeah, Cameron's part of our family. And so if we want to do something, we're going to figure out a way to make it happen. And we're going to bring him along. And I hope when it's all said and done, and sorry, this is the biggest thing for me, because I always have mom regret, right? Mom guilt. But I hope that when it's all said and done, that Cameron will be able to look back and appreciate the life that we gave him. I think we will hope that for our kids, all of our kids, right?
I just don't know that Cameron can express it the same way. I know he can't express it the same way. So I look forward to that day when when his understanding is different and he's whole again. And I hope that he will appreciate all that he's been given. Sorry. And selfishly, I don't want to sit around and do nothing. I want to do things. And so we're dragging him along whether he wants to or not. Because that's what we want to do.
We talked about how much bandwidth a child with special needs requires and how Kelley often feels guilt for the time this takes away from her other children. I asked how she compensates for that.
It's been a little bit easier as Cameron's gotten older. But he is in high school this year, and there's opportunities for activities and things where he gets to go do something and we feel comfortable with the people that he's with, and that gives us time with the other kids. It wasn't quite so easy when Cameron was younger and he was always with us and at home. And so I feel a little bit grateful. Maybe that's one reason to be grateful that they're spread a little bit further apart. Yeah. I always kind of wondered at first, I'm like, gosh, there's such a big gap. It's like 2.5 or 3.5 years between the different things. But for a while I thought, that's so far. Like, why are the kids spaced out so far? But it kind of gives a good opportunity because Parker and Cecily are still young enough that they want that parent time. And Cameron's old enough that he gets to be more independent. So we try to take advantage. Even the other day, Cecily had a couple birthday parties. And so she and I one-on-one went to her activity in the morning and then went to go shop for the birthday presents and then took her to the birthday parties. And I don't know if that means anything to her, but I enjoyed just only having her that day and being able to spend time. So we look for opportunities. We kind of maximize our time when Cameron gets a chance to do other things where we spend time with the kids and try to build those relationships.
I would just love to hear from you what you love about each of your kids.
With Cameron, I love his intuitiveness to people's feelings. He is so tender-hearted when it comes to making sure that other people are okay. I just had a church teacher call me yesterday. They had a lesson in their Bible study class yesterday morning about a very tender subject, and the teacher was very emotional throughout it. And she said, Cameron kept saying, "Do you need a tissue? Are you crying?" And she kept explaining to him, "Yes, I'm crying, but I'm feeling the spirit about this, and this situation, this experience is true, and it's tender to me." And then at the very end of class, he said again, "Do you need a tissue?" And she said, "Nope, I need a hug." And of course he was happy to oblige.
The best hugs.
Right. So I love his intuitiveness and care for other people's situations and their emotions. And those are some of the few things that he will remember. Someone may say, "My mom's in the hospital," and he won't see that person for a month. And the next time he sees that person, his first question is your mom still in the hospital? How's she doing? Whereas he won't remember how to spell his own name day to day, but he'll remember those tender feelings and emotional attachments. So I love that about him. With Parker, he is absolutely coming into his own with his personality. I love being able to relate with him outside of just mom rules and mom instructions. And I love being able to share jokes with him and share radio songs, the songs that he loves on the radio, the movies he loves, the way that he loves to interact with Leo and I on a more mature level. I am enjoying very much that relationship with him and watching him become a great kid. He truly, truly is a great kid. And he does look out for others, especially younger than him. He very much likes to and is drawn to younger children and has that very nurturing aspect to him. And I love seeing that in him. Cecily is so smart, and that kid absorbs everything, and she is all over the place. And one of our favorite things about her is her laugh.
when you can get her to give a deep, hearty laugh and something just strikes her right. That was one of the best sounds in the world. And watching her try something and be successful at it and proud of herself, because she's so quick to shut down when she doesn't feel like she's successful, that when she is successful and you see that pride in herself and the way that she is internally happy and glows from that, I love that. I love seeing her be successful at the things she tries.
Yeah. Yeah, you nailed those kids on the head. You did not nail those kids on the head. That's a bad analogy. One of the last big questions I asked Kelley was what advice she would give to other moms with children who have special needs. And this is where more of that trademark honesty comes through. In the hard way.
Yeah. A lot of it, honestly, is the same. It may sound trite, and it's the same thing that a lot of moms say, but it gets better. Like particularly when Cameron was 4, and I had Parker at that point, and he was about a year old, a little bit older than that. That was a very, very rough time for me. I probably should have sought outside help, and I didn't. Again, a little bit of stubbornness or whatever. And I just tried to muscle through, and it was tough. I was working full time, and now I had 2 kids, and one with special needs, and in the throes of trying to figure out navigating schools and therapies and doctor's appointments, and just like we always talk about, the physicalness of those young kids, right? But I honestly, truly, truly felt like I was underwater, like I could barely keep my head above water. And you always hear the phrase, the days are long, but the years are short, or, all that hope for the future. But it's true. For me, it has been true. And I am much more enjoying my motherhood at this stage than I ever did 10 years ago. I honestly had a point in my life where I read articles about moms that were, in my mind, brave enough to leave their families and take care of themselves and realize that motherhood maybe wasn't their gig. And I felt like that for a long time. And it was rough. I did not enjoy being a mom at all. I love being a wife. I've always loved being a wife. But the motherhood part has not always been my thing. And so I would tell myself, hold on and find a support. Find friends that you can be honest with. Find people that you can let them know how you feel. And then again, for me, it was in front of me and I had to do it. And I wouldn't leave. But gosh, reading those situations and stories of people that kind of found that freedom and kind of got to get out of that hard situation. And it wasn't just that. There's other aspects to the things that I read and the stories that I read and stuff. But it's hard. For me, it was very hard. And going from Cameron to Cameron and Parker was my hardest adjustment from 1 to 2. But I would tell myself, just hold on. It's a ride and it does get better. And it has for me. I'm in a much better mom place now.
And there's a really simple solution for all this. If we could just give every mom a time machine with her first baby so that she could take a little vacation and be pre-kids mom. Right. She could be retirement grandma mode or, just bounce back and forth and just have a day here and there to just be in that other situation.
Yes. And no. Yeah. Oh, I really do feel better today when the kids are older or when I'm the grandma or for sure.
Yeah. So I'll
that's
get to
simple.
Work on that.
Yeah, that's a simple solution.
Product development. I think that could be. Yeah.
Yep.
Until I get my time machine scheme up and running, I honestly do find comfort in the concept that this too shall pass, whatever your own particular this is. I hope that whether or not you have children with special needs, that you're as inspired by Kelley and Cameron as I am. I'm so grateful she shared her story so openly and honestly. And since I know you're listening, Cameron, thanks so much for letting us share your story. Thank you so much for listening to the How She Moms podcast and for being part of this community. There are so many other ways for you to connect and hopefully also contribute. I share tips and ideas regularly on Instagram and Facebook at How She Moms. You can find past episodes and other resources at howshemoms.com. I have big plans for revamping my site this fall, so stay tuned for that. And you can always just email me directly at whitney@howshemoms.com. Special thanks to my own wonderful mom, Susan Singley, for recording my theme music. She played this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.